Good evening and welcome to Gunner Shot. Today we're going to go into where? The Dragonland. What are we going to talk of? We're going to talk of the forked tongue of the malevolent dragon. And why did I choose this? I mean, that's the more important thing, and then we'll see where it's going. For the past about 10-15 days, I've been seeing a lot of articles on like this. Outlook says ballet between elephant and dragon, only right choice. That's what the Wang Yi says. And then he says there's an outreach. There's a huge outreach to India, to many sources. Okay. And then, of course, for the first time, probably the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of the People's Republic of China comes out with this headline. Just see the headline. A cooperative party due of the dragon and the elephant is the only right choice for China and India. It's a massive outreach. And I spoke of it, and Chinese, of course, said, no, this is no outreach. We're not even interested in India. But that's how it is. But when their own Chinese ministry says, we have to think. And it's not that. The main points he made in this, China and India are in the, largest neighbors for each other, the largest developing countries. We need to support each other rather than undercut each other. Okay. Ancient civilizations have wisdom and capability to maintain peace and tranquility. So suddenly these old words of peace and tranquility are coming in. We are responsible nations, and we need to take on the responsibility of opposing hegemonism. Hegemonism by whom? USA. And all this power politics and things like that. Plain, come, let's join hands. That's what he's trying to say. And that's what he says. When China and India join hands, prospects for greater democracy and international relations for a stronger global south will improve greatly. This is a heavy pitch. Okay. And a lot of people in India are excited. And some of the people who wanted to get Chinese investment in probably, pada kush hai. And I, you know how it is. I don't believe in that. So I waited out. I did a thing on China wooing India, small clip. A lot of people have seen it. But the more important thing is, how do the Chinese, what are they doing? Why is it that they're doing? You have to understand that. That's the more important thing. So, well, as I waited out and I got the replies, I got articles by Chinese analysts who specialize in India. And these chaps have been writing in, on different subjects. So I got hold of a set of articles. The 3 articles which give views for the domestic audience. Okay. There is one outreach from a Chinese platform, that is Global Times, outreach to India, on the lines of what Wang Yi has given. And then one guy has gone and spoken in an international platform of signification. And then I've got an international view which actually tells you why China is doing what it is doing. And we need to understand this. That's why I said it. The whole story is of malevolence. It's not, there's no join hands here, all that. And you let us see that the views for the domestic audience are something else. In the Global Times and where it's meant for foreign audience, it's something else. And for international audience, it's something else. There are completely different way of looking at these things. And that's what we need to understand. What are the Chinese aiming at? That to me is the most important thing. Okay. So I found this in Guangzhou, where they've interviewed three scholars, Wang Shida, Liu Zongyi, and Lan Jiangshu. And they've interviewed it, very extensive interviews. And this is for the domestic audience. Remember this. It's in Chinese. I think this is now a translation. So let's go one by one. Now, this guy talks, Wang Shida, who's the executive director and researcher of the South Asia Institute of China Institute of Modern International Relations, basically in Sikar, China Institute of Contemporary International Relations. He writes extensively on India. So what has he written? You have to understand this. You know? So let's see what he's written. And I'll explain to you because this is not going to be a flashy kind of a video. I'm going to put out to you what they have written, of course, in shorter form, and then we'll analyze each of their Vyakyas. And this guy has spoken about, see, the heading is India's multilateralism. That's the thing. They, in China, they call it multi-way alignment, but we call it multilateralism. He says between multilateralism and non-alignment, there's no difference. It doesn't mean that India is neutral or unbiased. He says, look, in the US Soviet, Cold War, India chose the side of Soviet Russia. So India knows when to, go towards a person. But multilateralism, as per his understanding, means that India will not take a formal alliance with any country. And any alliance or alignment is issue based and based on national interest. That's his way of thinking it. So far, so good. Nothing wrong with it. But here comes the malice. He says India can only play a second role. And India will always be treated as a second-rate power by the West. Okay. It will also be treated as a second-rate role by the Eastern Bloc or the Soviet Union, and now as an extension Russia. Now, he says India, by refusing to join any alliance, aims to increase its influence in global South. And of course, India tries, apparently, as per him, to act as a balance between USA and Russia, but acts with opportunism between China and USA. So this is a very important thing which he said. He says India does the balancing act between USA and Russia. But when it comes to China and USA, India is opportunistic. I'm repeating it. And then, of course, he says whether it can really achieve strategic autonomy and avoid self-damage or that to get harm itself is a question mark. He's leaving it in the thing, look, India will not be successful. He's telling this to his audience that India will not be successful. Please understand this. Then he's talking of anxiety and self-awakeness in US diplomacy. That is the change in the diplomatic scene which has happened in US. And this is Liu Zongyi. He is the director of the South Asian Research Center of Shanghai Institute of International Studies. These are all their best think tanks. And these are the guys who constantly write about India. They shape Chinese opinion on India. Please understand this. I keep saying you need to know what's on the other side of the hill. This is part of that story. So what does he say? He says the most important relationship is with USA. Right? India's relationship. And India is very eager to seek, close cooperation with Trump and his administration. Why are they doing it? India seeks to gain a key position in the Indo-Pacific strategy of USA. Very, they're very clear. Okay. And then he says the Indian political and strategic circles. So all the thinkers of India, the leadership in India, the thought leadership or the political leadership are opportunistic. They want to take advantage of USA and its attempts to contain China. So this word opportunistic keeps repeating itself. So they feel India is opportunistic. Okay, wants to make use of an opportunity of the problem between USA and China. So this is a recurring thing. Okay, then what else he say? He says the Biden administration was pro-India as per his assessment, and at that time, India became a non-treaty partner of USA. He says at some places, India behaved more than a strategic partner, but it was more like an alliance. Certain things which India did were beyond an alliance, and that's a fact. That's a fact. Now, India expected greater support to replace China in the global supply chain immediately after the pandemic. That's what he's talking about. And he says India also expected greater support for its Atmanirbharta program, self-sufficiency, and in weapons and equipment. But USA has not helped them. He says that, and India hopes that USA will respect our domestic policy and foreign strategic autonomy. And as per him, USA is completely against it. Possible. Maybe last year it was so, but today things have changed. But this fellow has written it today. So they have a mindset on this. Now, he says, what about Trump 2.0? And India, of course, in the context of India always. He says, USA has always used India as a tool to suppress China. Okay. And Trump 2.0 does not have a place for India. Trump has no place for anyone as per China. So in the overall thing, he says, India's strategic visions have become difficult to achieve. What does the previous chap says? India will not become strategically autonomous, or its whole story of being multilateral without harming itself will not be successful. This fellow says India's strategic visions have become difficult. And he also says in the foreseeable future, the relationship between India and USA will become difficult. Why? Reciprocal tariffs, immigration issue, and all that. As per him, these are bigger issues. They're wrong. We know that. But how does the common Chinese know about it? The common Chinese will believe what these chaps have written. Like I said, this is for internal consumption of Chinese people in Chinese or Mandarin language. And what about the India-China relationship? There's increasing negativity and imbalance. And that's in trade, economy, everything, the whole lot. And that's right. But the negativity is ours or theirs. We are being open with them. And there's only subterfuge we get from China. But well, he's a Chinese, he's writing for Chinese audience, so it's like that only. And then he gives this lengthy thing, Updesh. Only by truly adhering to the independence of diplomacy and truly formulating foreign policies in the line of their own national interests and people's well-being can we truly achieve no tension. At the time of increasing turbulence and uncertainty in the world, now New Delhi should be more sober. कुछ और ही बोल रहा है. He is giving you उपदेश कि भैया तुम हमारे साथ आ जाओ. Okay, and you should work in our national interests or your national interests, जो भी है, for the people. So what we are doing is not for our people. I mean, he expects us to do what he wants, thinks is right for his people. They want us to do for our people. You see, this is all part of the thing which they're projecting internally to say that India is doing something which is not for its people. Remember that. Okay. The third, and the heading of this chap is, what is the key to becoming a global power? That's what he's spoken of. You see, that paper also took interview of these three different guys on three different topics. You get the different thinking that way. He's Lan Jiangshu. He's a director of the Asia Pacific Research Institute of Chinese Academy of International Studies. And these are some of the best think tanks of China. People say that you'll see trollers saying, oh, we don't bother about India, we don't think of India. No, they do think. It's just that it's not apparent to many of us. Yeah, 80% of their focus is on Trump and all that and internal. But you see, a whole lot of things. And when did I last speak of China? About 10 days back. In 5-10 days back, I've given you the view. I'm getting you the views of the 5 or the 6 top analysts of China. There are 5 principles of strategic positioning of India. And he says India's goal has been to be a great power ever since the time of Nehru. He says India pursues global leadership. That is in the current international order. He says India is the self-announced or self-proclaimed leader of global South. And it displays its strength in the global South. India wants to become the bridge between the global South and the global West, or the global North, whichever way you call it. Between the West and the global South. India wants to be the bridge. Okay. And Mr. Shankar wants to portray India as a Southwest power. South and the West power. Part of South and part of the West. Further, he says India sees itself as the hegemon of South Asia and the net security provider of the Indian Ocean. And it has a self-image of being a global spiritual mentor. And it highlights the Hindu characteristics of its diplomacy. Yeah, now he come to the negativity. So far, so good. I will give it to them. But now comes the thing. He says the positioning and practice of Indian diplomacy have not achieved the expected effect. Sorry. That India has not achieved anything. So they're again showing India down in front of their own eyes. Or rather, eyes of their people. Okay. And this is the longest interview, very relevant. So that's why I've taken 3-4 slides for this fellow. Because India's relations with neighbors are in constant turbulence. He talks of China, Pakistan, Nepal, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, Maldives, Myanmar. Thus, with everyone, they're in constant turbulence. Okay. The elites of Indian politics. This is a very interesting formulation, actually, this slide. Let me tell you. I'll go a little deliberately here. Some of you have said, it's good to watch General Shankar's videos in 1.2 speed. That's okay. But I need to be deliberate. That's where you get clarity of thought. It says the elites of Indian politics don't attach importance to being with the neighbors, or they are not around with the aspirations of people who are around them. So we are not with the neighbors, and we don't meet the aspirations of our neighbors. That's what now he is very clearly putting out. Well, let me digress a bit here. Okay. Per se, that's the case. But our neighborhood is a troubled neighborhood, and it has been so not now, from ever since. I mean, ever since we can remember, it's been a troubled neighborhood. At the same time, this is not decrying the fact that China's troubled is peaceful. They have fights now with everyone in South China Sea, India, Taiwan, Philippines, Japan, South Korea, even North Korea. So, what is so great? Everyone's. I mean, this is like the kettle calling the pot black. But then he's giving it to his internal audience. That's why the malevolent. See, they're painting the worst picture of India. Achha, this is another interesting thing. He says India, we go by Kautilya's theory and doctrine, which he calls as Kautilyanism. Now, here he says, as per Kautilya's principles, neighboring countries are natural enemies and neighbors of neighbors are your natural friends. That's what Kautilya said. No? He says if that is the attitude, you treat all your neighbors as enemies. So India treats everyone as its enemies around it, and it treats people who are far away as its friends, as per Kautilya. This is, he says, is completely against the Chinese way, which treats everyone around it as its friends. That's what he's projecting. And then he goes on to say that India controls all its neighbors who are weaker. But then there's a problem here. He says India's social and economic development is not up to the mark. And this is one of the reasons why there is no progress in harmonizing its relationship with the neighbors. That is our weakness is transposed to the others. Again, this is very funny. I mean, I don't understand. We have helped people. Just think whether it's Nepal or Bhutan or Sri Lanka now, or even Bangladesh when we had to help it. We've helped. Even Afghanistan we are helping. And we tell them, look, we are grown and we want you to go along with us, and that's our neighborhood first policy. Many people say it has failed. I don't think it has failed. I feel our neighborhood is troubled. So in a troubled neighborhood, you will always have to cope with uncertainty and turbulence. Right. So this is something which you have to understand again, that negativity which is being shown. And this is now about India-China relations. Now, India has a great power dream. So because of that great power dream, its relationship with China is complex and can't go further. He says India should not consider China as an obstacle, but a favorable factor for joint economic and social development. That means that's the olive branch. But what this social and economic development is, we'll talk of it. Before I finish, I'll talk of it. And he says the essence of the India-China relationship is how should these two large neighbors get along with each other with their huge populations. He is here parroting what Wang Yi says. And he says development is the only convention between India and China. And India and China should correctly grasp the historical trend and the development direction of the two country relations, trust each other, support each other, and achieve each other's goals. Big talk, but in all these three analysis, one thing is missing. What is that missing? The core issue between India and China. Why are India and China at loggerheads with each other? The border, 62 war. They have usurped complete accession. That is not spoken of. For them, they are not interested. These days, after the meeting in Kazan between Prime Minister Modi and Xi Jinping, and they pull back. They have just stopped talking of the border. Nowhere have they spoken of the border. They are now talking of other things. The positioning is completely different. And why? We'll just come to it. To the end, we'll see how it is. Now, this is from Global Times. He says this guy who's written, Zhang Jiadong, Zhang Jiadong is a director of Center for South Asian Studies at Fudan University. He says he hopes for a more rational voices on China within India. He says, I've been to India, all that, but we want more rational. And this is outreach through Global Times. And this outreach is more on the lines of Wang Yi has said, not on the lines of what the other three chaps have said. So this is the second level of operation. The first level is internal. The second level is external through their own platforms. What did he say? He parrots Wang Yi's say, whatever he says. He says China and India being major powers, the bilateral relationship is complex and multi-layered. I agree with him. But here he quotes Sam Petroda. Now, China has developed a habit of quoting all irrelevant guys and saying, oh, look at him. He's the guy who said so. So this is how it should be. And what Sam Petroda, I don't know where he said, that he's an old fool who's living in USA just because he's a Congress lackey. No, we know who he is. Even the Congress disowns his talk. But China picks it up. He says India should not view China as an enemy. And he says somewhere Sam Petroda must have said confrontational attitude creates enemies. So he says India shouldn't be confrontational with China. And he says there's a case of self-fulfilling prophecy. If you keep calling a chap an enemy, he'll become one. And ultimately, we will end up with China as our enemy. But when was China our friend? This is again Upadesh being given to us here through that Global Times. So this chap has amplified Wang Yi's that first statement which I showed. Then he says there is a increasing number of people within India who want friendship with China. There are a lot of people. Of course, there will be a lot of people. We have enough communists here who will talk like this. But then he also says there is hostility towards China in the public. And that the public is not convinced. At least he's acknowledged that. Okay. He says India's view of this entire relationship between India and China through the prism of the border, it is not realistic, or it is not fully representative of the actual potential and the relationship between India and China, which is more complex. Why is it more complex? Because we have very clearly said no border, no economy, something like that. They want the ulta of that. He says, forget about the border, we'll deal with other things. What are the other things? It's not only trade, global leadership, all that. And the last thing what does he say? He says, as rising powers, the worst choice for India and China would be to be adversarial with each other. That's what others also have said. As since this will weaken both countries. All this is very clear that look, we should be friends and let's team together against USA. Fundamentally वही है. But that's not the case. The case is something more deeper. I'll come to it. Then you'll understand all this nonsense which they're talking of trade, ye, wo, come hegemonism, global south, ye, wo, is not the case. And we need to understand it. Our fools in the government have to understand this. He says the simultaneous rise of India and China will be very good for the world, right? If the national interests of both the countries become more and more relevant or aligned. If they become aligned to each other and they get aligned to their people, then they'll be more relevant to the stability of the world. बड़ा complex है. Fundamentally, he says you should align with me. And there are many issues which India and China have to jointly solve. Forget about India and China jointly solving the world. First, the solution is required for between India and China. For that, all this claptrap is not needed. Then he comes out. He says only by looking at China-India relations beyond bilateral differences, border disputes, and other sensitive issues. What are the other sensitivities? He doesn't talk. He doesn't touch Tibet. And creating conditions for normal exchanges between the two countries, can we find a way for China and India to get along as they should? That is his formulation. He is now sidelined Tibet, he's sidelined the border, wish away whatever he is doing in our neighborhood. That's what they expect of us. And this is from an international platform, mind you. He's telling us this is what should be done. What the earlier three were for internal purposes. And now this is a guy called Mao KG. Okay. As per some guys, he's supposed to be the whiz kid of international relations. He's just about 33, 34 years old. And he's supposed to be concentrating on South Asia studies and all that. And this is a external view from an international platform called Sinification. So I found this there. He says, India, China, and the USA, a new chapter. Now, this chap is at Harvard. He's a visiting scholar at Harvard. But otherwise, he's from the School of Social Sciences in Tsinghua University. The Geet here is different. Here he says, this is a different formulation, but the end result is it's almost the same. Now, this is putting it across to international audience, not to us, but to international audience. Okay. He says, India's industrialization and modernization may appear to be development-related issues, but they are major geopolitical issues capable of reshaping the global order. How both these countries modernize and industrialize will reshape the global order. He's right. That's happening. And then he says, I believe that the India-US relationship under Trump will cool down. Personally, I don't believe so. And then he goes on to say, to everyone, that Trump administration does not emphasize the Indo-US strategy. or the Indo-US Pacific strategy, uh, the same way which the Biden administration did. Okay, so Trump has got no liking to the Indo-Pacific strategy of US, which under Biden. But then where this fellow has gone wrong completely. A lot of people are quoting him now. Incidentally, a lot of people are quoting him, and this is where we need to understand what this fellow is trying to do, or he's got no bloody clue. Otherwise, I think he's a duffer, to be very honest. See, the Indo-Pacific strategy of USA started under Trump. It was Trump who started it during the COVID time. The first meeting of the Quad was held then. The first foreign ministers meet was held in Japan during COVID time. Biden just built on it. And now to say that he's going to go back is stupid. After all, the Quad heads of meet is going to be held in India in September. And already the director of national intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard, is here today. You go to the X, you will find her comments. And then he says Modi's recent visit to Trump, or rather to meet Trump in USA, was a failure. And because Trump is transactional, he wants tangible financial gains, all that. He wants his arms to be bought in India, tariffs to be taken down. He'll not give any technology, nothing. That's his view. But he's putting it across, and in the West, and some of these Western platforms are praising him. And then he comes out with this thing that there is an element in India's strategic circles which does not want alignment with the USA. He says because these strategic circles feel that it is at the cost of India's strategic autonomy. And then a lot of people have started discussing why not restore full engagement with China. It's very subtle in the international thing. Then he comes up with something even more subtle. And this is something which I must read out. So he says, even if India is not genuinely friendly towards China, the mere facade of Sino-Indian friendship could help India increase its value in the eyes of USA. That means India will play the move towards China, will show to USA that I can go towards China and get the value of this relationship. So hence, there will be a thaw in the India-China relationship. It's a good gambit. But I don't think India is thinking in those terms. Look, at the end of the day, China is our neighbor. We need to have good relations with them in the ideal conditions. Those ideal conditions don't exist. Let's be very clear. Will they exist in my lifetime? No. Will they exist in your lifetime, which you are young people? Might. I don't know. Okay. Will there be a thaw in our relationship? It will not be. It will completely be transactional. Whatever thaw you think is happening will be transactional. Because the underlying problems of the China-India relation is the border and the Tibet question. And what these buggers are doing in the neighborhood in Pakistan. That's not solved. In all these talks, 4 chaps have spoken. Have you heard the word Pakistan? And yet, they talk of friendship. They are collusive with Pakistan and they don't talk of that. Okay. Now, there are other issues which have come up, which have now come to the fore. Our External Affairs Minister said we will not get off the dollar. China views it as that, look, India is a spoiler in the BRICS. And India has no interest in replacing the dollar with some other currency, which is a fact. Why should we? Which is the other currency in BRICS? Yuan. Why should we go there? Just forget it. And then, of course, from South China Morning Post, it comes India, China should get together and fight Trump against growing trade tensions and tariffs and all that. These articles keep coming. It's a drum beat which is coming. If someone says no, we don't bother about China, he's a bloody liar. Yeah. वो तो पढ़ता ही नहीं है. And then they're worried about the auto sector in India. This is about that. This analysis, this article in Guancha, it talks of Tesla coming in, all that. But it also says, look how India has ill-treated their manufacturers. They are not allowed to come in. So Tesla will also is living in dream world. It's all bad news, but it's being given internally. How India has rigged Chinese entry, automakers entry into EV makers into India. How barriers are put and all that. Why do they want this? I mean, this is the markets. They want our markets. They want to exploit our markets. That Ananta Nageswara Iswaran, who was a economic advisor, must read all this. Then he'll know what he's talking of and telling India to get Chinese investment here. It's all loaded with danger. I'll come to it. I've still not come to it. And then there's this great article which says Indian scholars. Indian army should study the Chinese army more before they know how backward they are. Very clear. This is again a portrayal within China. Now, who's this scholar who is being quoted here? That idiot, Praveen Sani. Praveen Sani, who we all know is pro-Chinese, he writes some crap and that's taken and shown as a blockbuster. He's a great Indian scholar. And Praveen Sani wants India to study the Chinese method of war. Which method? They've never fought. Whenever they have fought after 62, they've only lost. I mean, I don't know why India is, India is a good democracy. That's why they're tolerating that fool. Otherwise, he should have been in jail. If he had been in China, na, अभी तक वो पर्ज हो जाता. यहाँ बात कर सकता. But then it's okay, let him speak. Then we know China will keep feeding him. Whatever he speaks is from China. Keeping the communication open. And then they're worried. I mean, I don't know that there are 119 apps which are being under ban. I don't know. I didn't know this. So Chinese are worried about 119 apps which are going to be blocked. Okay, so all this is happening. All this is happening. This is how China is looking at us. Right? Now here is the crunch. Everyone must read this blog. It's called Noah's Opinion. Right? Why? He says this is a real eye-opener. Says China is trying to kneecap Indian manufacturing. What is it? Kneecap का मतलब क्या है? घुटने तोड़ दो यार. हिंदी में बोलो कि ताकि हम चल ना सके. हिंदी में. And you see the heading. He says China is trying to kneecap Indian manufacturing. It's an attempt to head off its only future rival. Only future rival. And this is the opinion of this man. Of course, you go into the article, it's very beautifully explained why the whole story will play out that way and what China is attempting. So what China is attempting comes out in this. He says, early 2000s, 2010, globalization meant moving manufacturing to China, that's over. That's not taking place. Then he goes on to say inbound direct investment, foreign direct investment into China has fallen off a cliff. And companies are now trying to pull their money out. These are conditions which are fact, and these are not reversible. But what he says interestingly is China is going to shift from being a destination of FDI to being a source of investment, which is again a true because Chinese money, Chinese, some big firms are cash rich, the state is cash rich. Their state owned corporations are cash rich. So they want to go and invest outside. They want to go invest outside and build factories and all that. Okay. Per se, it looks good that the fellow comes and invests here, all that. And he said this is the map which shows the amount of Chinese investment in the period 2019 to 24. In that, you see, even Sri Lanka has got a big blob. There's a lot of investment done all over. But in India, it's not much. And they want to increase that. The moment they do that, they want to control your economy. I mean, that's the whole story if you read this. I've got some excerpts of this. Have a look. This is something much must be read fully. I'll read it and then we'll talk. It says Beijing is encouraging Chinese companies to build plants in friendly countries while discouraging them from investing in others in a kind of industrial diplomacy. So plants will be built in friendly countries, not in others. There will be industrial diplomacy. India represents the most striking case of Beijing's effort to shape the international behavior of China's firms. Across a number of industries, Beijing seems to be discouraging Chinese firms making future plans to invest in India, while also limiting the flow of workers and equipment. So we should not get investment, we should not get expertise. Chinese engineers working at plants in India who came through Apple and all that felt like they were training their own replacements. So they say, why should you train Indian people? Forget it. No. That's why China blocked those workers, Chinese workers, to come here. So their investment, they are not interested in putting factories here. They'll say, you buy what you want. We'll do some Uparka investment. In all these products, this behavior is there. Apple products, electronics, solar products, tunnel boring machines. China has said, you want to buy, you buy, otherwise we'll not give you anything. And mind you, tunnel boring machines are fundamentally German technology. Because they're being assembled in China, and even if the German firm wants to set up something in India, China is objecting to it. So they are ensuring you don't get technology, you don't get investment, you don't get expertise in any manner. And in this article, he says, look, all this, China took it from USA and the West. In fact, the West and the USA helped China acquire all this capability and they came and invested into China. Now China is in a position to do so. But China will do everywhere else except India. That's why Gudne Tordo. Kneecap India. He says China does not want to build up the manufacturing capabilities of its biggest potential rival. Very clear. So all that talk which those 5 chaps have done is all nonsense. I hope you understood. So their kind of development and peace and tranquility and join hands and all that nonsense. You open markets so that we can invest, we can sell our goods, undercut your industry, finish your industry internally off, and so that you become dependent on them. We've already become dependent on them for API. If you go back to 2000, 2005, we were fully independent of API. We had our own API capability in India. Today you don't have, you're struggling to recreate it. You have technology, you have everything. You're dependent on China. They can weaponize APIs and turn the switch off. You have to ward off the glut of steel which will come from there. All those nonsense need not have happened if our previous governments were smart enough. That they were not was a matter of time at that point of time. But we need to understand what China is trying now. So why should we go to them? The most important reason companies want to make things in India isn't low labor costs. It's the lure of domestic market. Putting factories in India means getting a direct line to 1.5 billion people whose incomes are growing quickly. Chinese incomes are flattening it out. Their urbanization is flattened, gone max. People are declining. And tomorrow I'll talk about the Chinese economy and where it is going. We'll talk of that tomorrow. Incidentally, tomorrow morning at 10 o'clock, I'm going to talk with on P Guru's channel experimentally. Have a 10 o'clock live show in the morning with Mr. Sri Iyer. And we're talking of Chinese problems. Last, he says if China wants to stay more powerful than India, it has an incentive to make sure that economic development is not evenly distributed and that the new wave of globalization skips India entirely. That's the malevolence. China has a plan. We need to see through that plan. Do we have understanding of this? I do hope you people have understood what I'm talking. Actually, that's why I study so much about China. I'm deliberate. I write what those chaps have, written. I put it down so that then I read it out so that I'm not mistaken in how I analyze them. I do analysis. I don't do tamasha or masala. This is a quote from China. There's a big article today in Guancha. It's just about 5,000, 6,000 words. And it argues why China shouldn't invest in India. He says India has actively promoted the policy of industrial substitution in recent years, which uses China in the short term and derails from China in the long term and converges with the US and the West. बड़ा क्लियर है एक लाइन में. They feel that we're going to use China, derail from China, converge with the West. तो ये है इनका अंदर का हिसाब किताब. ये सोचते हैं हम बेवकूफ हैं, हम इनका भाषा नहीं पढ़ सकते. हाँ, हम बेवकूफ हैं, हम बहुत बेवकूफ हैं क्योंकि हम पढ़ते नहीं. आप किसी चैनल में जाके देखिए, कोई आपको आके बताएगा ये सब कुछ है नहीं. एक चैनल दिखाइए जो आपको who tells you what I've said. They all talk nonsense. India is very strong. China is dying. China will collapse. Pakistan will collapse. Pakistan will balkanize. This is all stupid talk. Or they'll say China will come, kill India. They'll bombard India. Or they have so many missiles. We don't have all that nonsense. So, how many people do this in-depth analysis? I'm actually dismayed. And on the other hand, you see how much they do in-depth analysis of our story. That is why I read a lot of Chinese वो कुछ दिन में मैं भी मैंड्रिन जैसे लगूंगा, like one of those chinky chews. Anyway, I'm getting carried away. Coming back to our topic, I hope you like this video. This is authentic thinking, Chinese thinking, which I projected to you. Please, if you like it, press that like button. Subscribe to Gunner Shot. Recommend your friends to join Gunner Shot if they want serious things. Like someone said, कि मसाला देखने के बाद must read, see, comes and see Gunner Shot to realize the reality value of where we are. This is reality. This is our India. We have to defend it. We'll never be able to defend it. We don't understand our enemy. I consider China my enemy, not my adversary. Right. Thanks. Thanks for watching. So I will now take on questions. But let me put a few. Let me summarize before I, what shall I say, take questions. Let me summarize this so that we are clear about my complete summary. What are the cornerstones of Chinese malevolence? They don't discuss the border issue at all. They don't discuss Pakistan. They don't discuss Tibet. They want our markets. Technology denial will be the name of the game. Invasion into the neighborhood is to be expected. They will suppress India at any cost and ensure it does not develop. They will ensure it does not have self-confidence to develop international status. China will interfere in India-USA, India-Russia relationship and India neighborhood relations. Let's expect it. This is part of the Chinese malevolence, which is ongoing and we must expect. And this is what I gathered from all this analysis today. I thought I'll share it with you. With this, I'll take some questions. Most of the existing Chinese technology were due to Western investment. Why is the West hesitating to bring in tech into India? Are they comfortable with the totalitarian system rather than a democracy? They're worried that India will turn the Chinese way. Once bitten, twice shy. Unfortunately, they got bitten by a communist cat. That's the problem. Yeah. We need to be clear that China is very clear that there cannot be two suns in the Asian sky. I completely agree with Rajiv. 100%. Right? There's no doubt. That's what he and I have been discussing so long. Okay. And we'll discuss this. In the coming week, we'll discuss it. We're going to spend 2-3 days together. If all goes well, maybe we'll do a live podcast from somewhere. So I hope GOI appointed think tanks are feeding necessary inputs for policy formulation and future course of action. I hope so too. Can you cover China's activities in Myanmar? I've already covered. We have covered when I did this, video with General PC Nair. Have a look at it. I am firmly of the view that corporate boys must spend time in the forward areas to understand the glory of Bharat and that it is time to show their patriotism. Yeah, I go with you. But that won't help. The government has to wake up, or think tanks have to wake up. If China can dump their products through other countries, can we buy those machines from those countries as second hand or smuggle them through, for example, like bloody buy the whole factory? It's easy to talk all this. But let me tell you, our corporates are not in this game. And our government doesn't prod our corporates to do what is required for the country. Barring Germany, does any country still have any serious manufacturing ecosystem? What is the extent of Chinese footprint in Europe and manufacturing? Hell of a lot. But there are a lot of countries which have the capability of manufacturing. It's not only Germany. France has, there's no doubt. Denmark has. After all, Denmark owns ASML, lithography machines, and all that. So they have special capabilities. Europe still has technology. And that's one of the reasons why we need to reach out to Europe. Okay. I don't see any great questions ahead before. Yeah, there's a lot of discussion. Let me see. If you can type in your questions, I'll still take them. Yeah, salute, sir. China is misquoting Namo and his comments in the latest podcast with Lex Friedman. Your views? They will. They will. That's their part of their deal. I've not heard that fully because it's about, I believe it's about 3 hours. I've heard it in bits and pieces. They will misquote. Let's not have any doubts about it. Sir, you should sometimes write something yourself in India's defense and about the reality. Well, I am. That's what I'm doing. Isn't it? All these podcasts are all about that. Yeah. What the steps government and ecosystem to follow to bring China to table to resolve border issue? Oh, there are a lot of steps to take. We saw some of the issues which we did on the border. But let's forget about the steps. The basic thing in, to get China to the table is you have to strengthen yourself. You have to strengthen yourself domestically. You have to strengthen yourself militarily. The day you have a danda, oh, सीधा हो जाएगा. Same thing happened with Pakistan, na? पाकिस्तान के साथ क्या हुआ? If you go back to the 80s, पाकिस्तान बड़ा तोप था यार. Today, same thing. And interestingly, my thesis, and Rajiv will, second it. China is slowly collapsing. It's a slow collapse of China. It's happening. We have to do things accordingly. And the biggest strength for India will come internally. This session is an eye opener. Hope governments and bureaucrats are following at least few steps. I hope so. What diplomatic achievements has India achieved while with which technologies we have achieved from United States? Well, this is not against USA. We'll not get into this. We are now talking of China. Let's stick to that. Yeah, China population is not 1.4 but around 1.2 billion, sir. Many experts are saying do a podcast on it. Jagpreet Bratra, I've done 2 episodes on population last about 2 months back. Have a look at it. I've spoken about the population. I've spoken about childbirths. I've spoken about marriages. I've spoken about old age. I've spoken about everything. Have a look at it. I've done a detailed 2-part presentation on population. अब देखते नहीं हो फिर आके एक सवाल पूछते हो यार. Yeah, what Rajiv says, very true. The slow demise of the China dream is on. And we'll talk of it. We'll talk of it probably in this week itself sometime, in a freewheeling talk. We get the time. But we have spoken of the slow collapse of China earlier. We did a terrific show last year. Have a look. It's in Gunner Shot. Just put slow collapse of China and that whole thing will come out. So you're familiar with the term mercantilism in economics? Yes, I am. China practices mercantilism and therefore looks at India as a prey, India as corrupt politicians and capitalists. Aren't there corrupt politicians and capitalists in China? Are US and Western people different? No. We have to set our own policies right. There's a time for the government to set its policies right. There are a lot of opportunities. The opportunities are opening up now. The opportunities are opening up because there's turmoil in the world. Trump is isolating himself. He's deglobalizing. Russia is on a limb. It's okay to say now, wartime economy, I'm very strong and all. What happens when he goes to a peacetime economy? Will he be ever at peace? Never. What about China? It's collapsing slowly. It's crumbling internally. Which is the big economy left? India, which is stable. This is the opportunity for us to correct ourselves. Why is that Qatar chap come to India? Why does Trump say India Middle East economic corridor? From India, things will go up to USA. Why is China doing all this outreach all of a sudden? Why is this different kinds of thinking going on? इंटरनली कुछ और बोल रहा है, एक्सटर्नली कुछ और बोल रहा है, इंटरनेशनल प्लेटफॉर्म में कुछ और बोल रहा है. There's a mental conditioning going on. Are we alive to it? Right. So I think we've had a terrific session. At least I've been researching this for the past 10 days, 15 days. And I thought I must put it out. I put it out for what it's worth. If you people have liked it, please send it to everyone. Give it to all your friends. Right? And the last question I'll take is Chanakya enough to overcome Sun Tzu, or do we need a hybrid model? Look, whether it's Chanakya or Sun Tzu, both have essentially said the same thing in variations. Take the best of both. And you'll see both have virtually all big thinkers have said almost the same thing. Okay. Right. With this, thank you. Tomorrow morning at 10 o'clock with Sri Iyer. I mean, the topic is, again, we'll talk of China, but I'm going to talk of the internal woes of China. And you'll get an idea how China is collapsing. Till then, good night, Jai Hind, and have a great day, wherever you are.